Shockwaves shook the monarchy on April 21st, 2025, when Prince William uncovered a locked red box in his father's private study at Clarence House. Labeled Confidential, 1995, the box contained Diana's handwritten letters and audio cassettes, sealed away for over 30 years. They were her last words, messages of love, fear, and warnings for her sons. Charles had kept them hidden since 1997, never revealing their existence to William or Harry. For William, the discovery was devastating, a revelation that shattered trust and reopened wounds thought buried with Diana herself. The day everything changed for William. On the morning of April 21st, 2025, Prince William entered his father's private study at Clarence House with the purpose of reviewing state briefs. Charles, recovering from health concerns, had delegated some clearance authority to his eldest son. Among the polished furniture and leather folders, William noticed a small red box tucked behind a desk cabinet. Its label read, Confidential, 1995. The year alone startled him. That year had defined his childhood. The Panorama interview, the separation, the collapse of his parents' marriage. Curiosity overcame hesitation. The box was locked, but William's clearance allowed him to open it. What he expected were government papers or sealed Commonwealth notes. Instead, the box contained personal documents, letters, memos, and 5 audio cassettes addressed directly to Charles. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, Diana's sweeping script from the 1990s. For William, now 42 years old, it felt like a voice reaching across nearly 3 decades of silence. The discovery was staggering. For more than 30 years, these letters and tapes had been hidden, never once disclosed to him or Harry. Inside the notes, Diana's words carried raw emotion, expressions of love, fear, and despair, written between 1992 and 1997. The fact that Charles had kept them alone through every crisis since Diana's death in August 1997 cut William to the core. What else, he wondered, had been buried all this time? According to one staffer, William remained in the study for over an hour, reading fragments and playing sections of the tapes. When he finally left, his face was pale, his silence heavy. "It changes everything," he muttered before closing the door. What began as a morning of state work had turned into the moment that would redefine his understanding of his father and his mother's hidden story. William left Clarence House shaken, but he carried the box with him. Within hours, he sat alone at Kensington Palace, pressing play on one of the cassettes. The room filled with Diana's voice, frozen in time. It was then William realized he wasn't just reading history. He was hearing it, unedited, unfiltered. And in that voice lay a mother's final legacy, hidden from her sons for decades. Diana's forgotten voice. The box revealed treasures of heartbreaking intimacy. The letters spanned 5 years, from 1992, the year of Charles and Diana's official separation, to August 1997, the days before the crash in Paris. They chronicled Diana's emotional battles, her fears of being monitored, and her desperate desire to shield William and Harry from the cold machinery of royal life. Some letters carried warnings, others carried prayers. All carried pain. Among the most haunting discoveries was a cassette dated July 1996. On it, Diana's voice spoke directly to her sons. "If you're hearing this, something has gone very wrong. Remember kindness. Remember truth. Never let them change who you are." The tape lasted 11 minutes, her words cracked but steady. For William, hearing it in 2025 was like reopening a wound that had never fully healed since age 15, when he lost her. The letters included moments of startling foresight. Diana expressed regret about how the palace treated her, suspicions of her phone being tapped as early as 1993, and her fear that her boys would inherit not just the crown, but its loneliness. One note, written just 3 months before her death in May 1997, said, "I only hope they will know who I really was, not the version written for me." William, staff say, played the cassette 5 times in silence. He sat with his head in his hands, motionless. The sound of his mother's voice, missing from his life for 28 years, was overwhelming. The realization that Charles had hidden these messages only deepened the sense of betrayal. For William, this wasn't just about history. It was about stolen memories, his mother's final words, buried for decades. If Diana's voice was the discovery, Charles's secrecy was the wound. For William, the box begged one question. Why would his father keep such treasures from him and Harry for so long? The answer lay not in accident, but in deliberate choice. A decision made in 1997, sealed by palace strategy, and hidden behind the word protection. Why Charles hid the truth. Royal insiders trace the decision back to September 1997, just weeks after Diana's funeral. In an emergency meeting at Balmoral Castle, Charles sat with Queen Elizabeth II and the head of MI5. The question, what to do with Diana's remaining letters and tapes, many addressed personally to Charles. The advice was blunt: secure them, archive them, and keep them out of public and private circulation. Officially, the plan was to protect the monarchy. The materials would be catalogued, sealed, and stored. But Charles made one exception. He personally retained a selection of the most sensitive items. Among them were the notes and tapes William found in April 2025. For the next 27 years, he never disclosed their existence, even as William married in 2011, even as Harry left for California in 2020. Insiders now believe Charles's motives were twofold. First, fear. Diana's words often carried criticisms of palace life and hinted at mistrust of surveillance. Second, legacy. He worried that if William and Harry read them too young, their relationship with him, and with Camilla, would be permanently poisoned. One aide said in 2002, "The fear was always that her words would undo him." Yet the decision had consequences. By keeping the box secret, Charles not only shielded his sons from their mother's voice, he also positioned himself as its sole custodian. For William, this meant 3 decades of silence, years in which he could have known Diana more fully. The strategy may have been protective, but in the end, it felt like betrayal. For William, knowing why didn't ease the pain. He left Clarence House and returned to Kensington Palace with the weight of 3 decades pressing down on him. Alone in his library, he replayed the tapes, reread the letters, and tried to reconcile the man who raised him with the father who had hidden his mother's words. What came next was not anger, but exhaustion, an emotional collapse that lasted hours. William's private reaction. Back at Kensington Palace, William shut himself in the library at 2 p.m. on April 21, 2025. He told staff to hold calls and postpone meetings. For nearly 7 hours, he stayed inside, replaying tapes, sorting letters, and making notes. He emerged only at 9:15 p.m., drained and pale, whispering to an aide, "I need to think." This changes everything. The phrase captured the gravity of what he had uncovered. One of his first actions was to call Harry in California. The brothers had not spoken in weeks, their relationship strained. But on this night, William dialed at 10 p.m. "We were kept from her twice," he said, referring first to Diana's death in 1997, then to Charles's secrecy since. The words, overheard by staff, carried anger but also pain. It was the first spark of renewed connection between the estranged brothers. Kate noticed the change immediately. That evening, she was photographed leaving Kensington Palace alone, wearing a somber coat at 10:45 p.m. Insiders confirmed William had asked for space, unable to process the discovery with anyone, not even his wife of 14 years. For him, the letters weren't just about history. They were about trust, betrayal, and the mother he lost at age 15. Sources close to William say he contemplated confronting Charles immediately that night. But instead, he chose restraint, deciding first to share the truth with Harry. The decision reflected his loyalty to his brother, and his recognition that Diana had always wanted her sons united. The box, though hidden for decades, had reignited a bond long thought broken. The more William read, the clearer it became. These letters were not just family keepsakes. They were meant for him and Harry. Advice, warnings, encouragement. Diana had written directly to her sons, not the crown. Each word revealed what had been denied to them for nearly 3 decades. And the content cut deep, touching on subjects far beyond what William expected. The letters that should have been theirs. Among the papers dated 1993 to 1997, Diana had written specifically about her hopes for William and Harry's futures. One note, written in 1994, spoke of marriage. "Choose kindness above duty. Do not let this institution make you cold." Another, penned in 1996, warned about media. "The cameras are not your friends. Guard your heart. Guard your family." For William, these were lessons he should have grown up with, not discovered at 42 years old. One letter shocked him most. Dated February 1993, it mentioned Kate Middleton by name. Diana had met Kate briefly during a St. Andrews University charity event years earlier. Before William and Kate became a couple in the 2000s, she wrote, "One day William will find someone kind. Tell her not to change for this institution." William reportedly froze when he read it, realizing his mother had sensed the very path he would take decades later. Other notes revealed Diana's loneliness. One letter, written in April 1995, confessed, "Even Edward sees me more than Charles." It reflected her sense of isolation inside Kensington Palace. To William, the revelation was doubly painful. His uncle had offered Diana the compassion his father withheld. The thought that Charles had read those words, yet never shared them, left him seething. For William, the letters weren't history. They were stolen guidance. They were his mother's blueprint for survival, withheld until he had already become husband, father, and heir. By discovering them now, he realized what could have been different, what advice he might have lived by if only Charles had shared them. The loss was not just emotional, it was formative, reshaping his understanding of his own life's course. The weight of discovery was too much for William to carry alone. Within hours, Harry received the call that would reignite their fractured bond. What followed was grief, fury, and a sense of betrayal so sharp it reached across the Atlantic. For Harry, Diana's voice had been stolen twice, first by death, then by secrecy. His reaction was immediate, emotional, and loud. Harry's response from California. When William's call came through at 10 p.m. London time, 2 p.m. California time, Harry answered from Montecito. Meghan was by his side. As William explained the discovery, Harry reportedly broke down, covering his face in his hands. "You had no right to bury her voice." "Not from us," he later said to Charles in a private follow-up call. The pain was clear. At age 40, Harry felt robbed of his mother all over again. Meghan comforted him, visibly shaken herself. Insiders say she whispered, "She wanted you to know." Harry agreed, insisting that withholding those letters had been an act of emotional theft. For him, Diana's voice had always been the missing piece of his story. The idea that it had been kept hidden for 28 years was unbearable. His anger quickly turned to determination. Within days, Harry and William agreed to request an internal inquiry into how Diana's personal materials had been handled. They raised concerns that the palace system had enabled secrecy stretching back to 1997. Harry went further, reportedly telling Meghan and close friends that if the palace failed to act, he would consider releasing portions of the letters himself. The risk of global scandal loomed. For the first time in years, the brothers aligned. They were united by grief, fury, and betrayal, not of each other, but of the silence imposed by their father and the institution. Diana's letters had done what years of reconciliation attempts could not. They brought William and Harry back to the same side. But their unity carried consequences the palace was not prepared to face. The stage was set for confrontation. With William shaken, Harry enraged, and Diana's words resurfaced. All eyes turned to Charles. How would the king defend 3 decades of silence? The answer came in a private meeting at Clarence House, one filled with sorrow, confrontation, and no resolution. Charles's silent confrontation. On Sunday, April 27, 2025, William requested a private audience with his father at Clarence House. The meeting began at 11 a.m. and stretched into the early afternoon. Witnesses described the atmosphere as heavy with sorrow. William arrived carrying notes he had made after reading Diana's letters. Charles sat quietly, his hands clasped, knowing the confrontation could not be delayed. For the first time in years, father and son faced each other not as monarch and heir, but as 2 men divided by truth. William's words were steady, yet sharp. "You made that choice alone," he said, referring to Charles's decision in 1997 to hide Diana's letters and tapes. He reminded his father that the notes had been written for him and Harry, not for archiving, not for secrecy. To William, the silence of nearly 28 years was unforgivable. The betrayal was personal, cutting deeper than any political or institutional debate. Charles defended himself with a familiar refrain. "I did what I thought was best at the time." He explained how, after Diana's death in August 1997, the monarchy teetered on collapse. The Queen, Charles, and Bayway 5 had agreed secrecy was the safest course. He admitted he feared the contents would devastate his son's view of him and irreparably damage Camilla's reputation, just as she was beginning to rebuild it in the 2000s. His defense was strategic, not emotional. But William was unmoved. "We were kept from her twice," he repeated, echoing the words he had told Harry days earlier. The meeting ended without resolution. Charles, seen leaving the room at 2:15 p.m., appeared in tears, a rare display of vulnerability noted by aides. The king's grief was clear, but so too was the divide. The conversation had not healed wounds, it had widened them. As the meeting's whispers leaked, Buckingham Palace faced mounting pressure. Headlines across April 28th to 29th, 2025 demanded answers. The Guardian called it the monarchy's most human crisis, while the Times declared, Diana's voice silenced, then found. The palace knew silence would only fuel suspicion, yet their response would be as vague as it was telling, careful words designed to protect unity, even as the truth screamed louder. The palace's official response. On April 30th, 2025, Buckingham Palace issued a brief, carefully crafted statement at 10 a.m. The royal household acknowledges the emotional nature of recent developments and seeks continued unity within the family. No mention was made of letters, cassettes, or William's discovery. It was the monarchy's oldest tactic: acknowledge emotion, avoid detail. But in the modern media landscape of 2025, the omission spoke louder than inclusion. News outlets dissected the statement within minutes. The BBC noted its vagueness, ITV called it "Palace Code for Silence," and Sky News questioned whether Charles had lost credibility. On social media, the hashtag #DNASVOICE trended for 48 hours, with millions demanding the release of her letters. Public support swung behind William. A YouGov poll on May 1st, 2025, showed 71% of Britons believed Diana's materials should be made public, in part or full. Inside the palace, the statement deepened divides. Advisors loyal to Charles insisted secrecy was necessary to preserve dignity. Others, closer to William, argued that transparency was the only path forward. One senior aide reportedly warned, "If the people believe Charles silenced Diana twice, his moral authority will collapse." The debate raged privately, even as the public grew restless. For William, the palace's words felt hollow. He had expected at least acknowledgement. Instead, the statement erased his discovery as though it were rumor. To him, it confirmed what Diana had always warned. The institution survives by burying emotion. But this time, William was determined not to let his mother's truth be buried again. While the palace's official silence dominated headlines, insiders turned their eyes to Camilla. Her name was never mentioned, but her shadow loomed. For decades, she had lived with knowledge of the red box. For decades, she had benefited from Charles's decision to keep Diana's words hidden. And now, with William enraged and public opinion surging, Camilla's unspoken role came under scrutiny like never before. Camilla's unspoken role. Though not formally implicated, Camilla's connection to the red box was undeniable. Insiders recalled that as early as 2003, she had been overheard saying, "Some things are best left unread." The comment, made during a conversation with Charles, hinted she knew of Diana's materials. For William, the thought that Camilla had lived alongside the truth for over 20 years without speaking was intolerable. In the days following April 21st, 2025, William avoided Camilla entirely. At a scheduled engagement on April 25th, he was photographed greeting Charles warmly, but offering only a curt nod to the Queen consort. His distance was glaring. Days later, on May 2nd, William hosted a private remembrance dinner at Kensington Palace in Diana's honor. Camilla was not invited. The omission was deliberate, signaling an unmistakable fracture. Palace aides whispered that Camilla's position had weakened. Though Charles remained publicly supportive, even loyal courtiers admitted her influence was fading. The box had not just exposed Diana's words, it had reopened the question of Camilla's role in Diana's suffering. William's coldness was read as judgment, and judgment from the heir carried weight. For Camilla, who had spent 19 years rebuilding her image since her marriage in 2005, it was a devastating blow. By mid-May, polls confirmed the damage. A Daily Mail survey on May 10, 2025, found 62% of respondents felt Camilla should step back from ceremonial duties in light of the revelations. Though she had not touched the letters, the perception was enough. William's exclusion of her spoke volumes. In silence, the queen consorts standing within the family and the nation diminished. With his father shaken, the palace defensive, and Camilla weakened, William stood at a crossroads. For him, this was no longer about secrecy. It was about legacy. What would he do with his mother's words? Would he guard them, as his father had, or share them with the world? Those close to him say the answer has already begun to take shape. One that could redefine how Diana's story and William's reign will be remembered. What comes next for William? By June 2025, William had set a clear course. He ordered a full cataloging of all Diana-related materials still in royal archives, including journals, correspondence, and recordings. His instructions were precise. No more hidden boxes, no more private locks. For the first time since 1997, Diana's voice would be preserved transparently, not controlled. A digital memorial project was quietly commissioned, with trusted archivists sworn to protect authenticity. William also reached beyond the palace. In late May 2025, he contacted a respected biographer known for integrity. The task? To write a definitive account of Diana's inner life, built entirely from her own words. No spin, no edits, no palace filters. The book, planned for release around the 30th anniversary of Diana's death in August 2027, would serve as her voice speaking directly to the world. Rumors began swirling in June that William might deliver a public address on August 31, 2025, the 28th anniversary of Diana's death. Advisors debated the risks. Charles feared it would further fracture the monarchy, but William's allies argued the opposite. "This is not rebellion," one confidant said. "It is restoration." For William, honoring Diana was not undermining the crown. It was redefining it. Above all, those closest to William saw a transformation. The box had not just hurt him, it had woken him. For decades, he had balanced loyalty to the monarchy with loyalty to his mother. Now, the balance shifted. William was determined to reshape how Diana's story is remembered, ensuring her words are never silenced again. And in doing so, he was shaping the crown he will one day wear. What William found inside the red box changed him forever. The letters, written between 1992 and 1997, spoke directly to her sons. In one, Diana warned about the pressures of royal marriage. In another, she pleaded that William never let the crown harden his heart. The most haunting was a cassette dated July 1996, where Diana's trembling voice said, "If you're hearing this, something has gone very wrong." For William, now 42 years old, hearing his mother's words after nearly 28 years was unbearable. The realization that Charles had kept these treasures hidden was more than betrayal. It was emotional theft. He had buried Diana's voice not once, but twice, first in death, then in secrecy. Sources revealed William sat for nearly 7 hours in his Kensington Palace library, replaying the tape 5 times in silence. By the end, his resolve was clear. This truth could no longer remain hidden. William's first call was to Harry in California. Their relationship had been strained, but grief united them. "We were kept from her twice," William told him. Harry broke down, furious that their father had chosen silence over honesty for nearly 3 decades. Meghan comforted him as he vowed, "We will not let her voice be buried again." For the first time in years, the brothers stood side by side, demanding answers. Charles's defense was sorrowful yet firm. He insisted the decision in 1997 was made to protect the monarchy, guided by Queen Elizabeth and Mempher V. But William's reply cut through, "You made that choice alone." The confrontation ended with Charles in tears, shaken but unmoved. The monarchy issued only a vague statement, fueling suspicion instead of silencing it. Now, public opinion sides overwhelmingly with William. Polls show a surge in support for releasing Diana's letters as a matter of historical record. Insiders confirm William is already working on a digital memorial, ensuring Diana's true voice reaches future generations. And with whispers of a public address on August 31st, 2025, the anniversary of her death, the world may finally hear what the palace kept silent for so long. For William, this was not just discovery. It was awakening. His mother's hidden words have become his new mission, and perhaps the crown's greatest reckoning.